So, welcome to another edition of the Influence Global podcast. And I'm delighted to have with me Chris Platt, who is the head of content. TH Live is the series of events for Times Higher Education. Chris, it's a pleasure to have you with us on the Influence Global podcast. How are you today?
I'm very well, thanks, Gordon. You got the name right as well, Platt. What with Chris Pratt coming to prominence and whatnot, I often get when it's written down, I often get this sort of taken to be him, but perhaps not so much in person.
No, indeed, no, indeed. And of course, we met at an event in the summer, and I wanted to have a chat with you further about what I'd like to almost call educational influencers. The establishment of education, I think, is a very, very important area that we haven't actually covered at all on the podcast. So I think it's going to be really quite interesting. But before we get into that, tell us a little bit about your role and Times Education.
Yeah, absolutely. So Times Higher Education, we've got a number of different sort of remits that we work in. I work primarily in the events part of it, and now what we try and do is we're known for ranking. Really, it's a rankings organization that goes through and looks at all these millions of data points and decides, what universities are doing great work in things like innovation, leadership, and things like that. And the events act as a really nice point, seminal point really, around in different locations, to act as the times when we can work on solutions which we either see through best practice through our rankings, or to sort of say, well, where are we sort of not picking up on? Where are these new emerging areas where perhaps some new universities, young universities, doing a lot of good work?
Mm.
And the point of that is so that we get the breadth of the sector, and we're not sort of just focusing on a few small elites. And we're basically reminding people of how dynamic and agile the education sector is, and that sort of brings upon all different types of topics. Just in my events alone, THE Live, you've got marketing and communications, which is perfect for this conversation, but we've also got operations, innovation, employability, internationalization, hybrid. We've got a whole load of digital sort of events as well in our digital universities. So we're just trying to summarize and exemplify and spotlight the huge amount of work that people are doing across the world, because there's some really exciting stuff going on.
Yeah, well, and of course you just said world there. You're running events. You've just come back from Australia. You're
Yeah,
running
that's
events
right.
all around the world. And British education has got a great brand identity, hasn't it?
Yeah, it has.
I've
Yeah.
certainly seen that around the world. So yeah, and so of some of your programs, how many of those are from overseas delegates?
Absolutely. So, well, I mean, we have five main ones for THE Live, them being ANZ, as you mentioned. We do Southeast Asia, Japan, UK, which is our biggest flagship event, and our next one is actually US. So, though for higher education, at least, those are some real key areas, key sectors, and key regions. You could probably add the Middle East and North Africa to that as well. You're seeing a huge amount of work coming out of Africa proper, as it were. And obviously South America, a place like Brazil, have got hundreds and hundreds of universities. So yeah, it's very difficult to say, this region is a particular powerhouse. Like, there's all the different strengths depending on where you are. Obviously, the US is the largest sector, but Asia is come really, really prominent after the pandemic. It was already making those moves before, and it's just accelerated. And as you alluded to there, the British model is still very, very highly sought after and respected. So you see a lot of people wanting to see the Brits go abroad and sort of have that connection and that thought leadership in education too.
Yeah, it's funny actually, because I was in Brazil in June launching my new book in influencer marketing strategy in Portuguese, as well as making a film. And the
Just
students,
that, just those two things.
just those two things. I know. Yeah, sorry. But it was a documentary film that we created out there. But they really, of 2 hours signing the book, and the audience was telling me, or the people involved in it, is the Brazilian market are just crazy for education. They
Yeah,
really lap it up. Well, one of the organizations there has like 30,000 students. And I was like,
yeah,
whoa, this is incredible.
yeah. It's massive. I think it's that idea that, we're moving into a future that is very much knowledge based, and it's those knowledge based economies that are doing the most, and really coming on leaps and bounds. So yeah, I think, if you look at most of those areas we've mentioned, education, and specifically higher education, is really starting to come up the table when it comes to like exports and take up. And there,
Mhm.
I mean, in saying that, there are areas where take up of education is going down, and that's where sort of the marketing and the communications and getting your story out there and hearing from your audience is becoming really, really important.
Absolutely. So what makes an educational influencer? So if when we think of some of the professors and the academics that have got a lot of knowledge about their own
Mm,
sector, they of course are influential, aren't they, in their own
yeah,
right?
very, yeah,
We may not necessarily call them an influencer in the traditional sense, but actually they have world-class authority. But I'm also interested to see that this new breed in the teaching profession that are, using, perhaps have got a tech bias in some shape or form,
yeah.
that are they're not wishing to trivialize their content by, yeah, doing TikTok dances, but what they are doing is doing some really interesting areas. So yeah, just expand a bit about that for me.
Yeah, I mean, the reason I sort of chuckled a little bit when you said what is an education influencer is because, yeah, it's a really hard thing to put your finger on. I think mainly because the majority of the people we would consider to be influencers in this field are practitioners.
Mm,
So they consider themselves a teacher first, and they probably would never dream of calling themselves an influencer, but
of
their
course.
following and their prominence, as you mentioned, probably would make them an influencer, whether
Mm,
that's because they're the president of a huge organization such as a Caltech or a Cambridge or a National University of Singapore, for example. You get that prominence from your position, but then you touched upon TikTok there, and it just sparked something in my mind. There are these people who have a greater proclivity towards technology, and that draws them to platforms such as TikTok, Instagram, and what have you. And they apply their practitioner knowledge to the new technology, and you see these really interesting and new ways of doing things. We've got wonderful man, Christopher Clark, who's out in the US, who became nationally famous. He's a professor of economics, but during the pandemic, the students couldn't come in, so we just did little bite-sized videos on TikTok about economics.
amazing,
And
amazing,
now
amazing.
he's famous in the States, and he's got influence. And I found him because I was doing my research, and he's talking at the event, about how you can use new platforms and what have you. And I think, it's so there are people doing things like that, but then education.
But I was going to say he's not probably trivializing what he's doing. He's just being
No,
aware of the audience, but doing it in a very interesting and engaging way that people,
yeah,
TikTok, for example, isn't all about just entertainment and silly dances. It's a major platform
yeah,
that people are now and spending hours and hours of time on. So I think one thing is particularly interesting. Those people within the education establishment that are on there are going to stand out more because not all of their colleagues, competitors, whatever you want to call them, are going to be there. So it's
yeah. And I mean, someone like Chris, who was out there, I think he was at Texas at the time. It's because he was such an economist and a data-driven person that he was able to gain sort of institutional buy-in for that, because he was looking at the data and saying, look how many eyes you've got on this. Look where the growth is going here. Look who it's going to, etc. He had a real deep knowledge of the analytics behind it. And the university goes, yeah, we're sort of missing a bit of a trick here, because I think if you were part of a very entrenched traditional elite university who's very particular about both their brand and their reputation and their messaging, you might not be welcomed to go on something like TikTok, a platform they don't know anything about, to talk about what you want to talk about and not towing the line, and you might end up on the wrong side of that sort of situation as well. So, but somewhere in the middle there is universities and higher education sector at large realizing that they haven't really been in touch with their audience for quite some time.
Correct. Yeah.
Some people would say that the pandemic caused this, but I think actually most of the people I talk to, which is hundreds of people in all these different regions, they say no, it just accelerated it. We had an idea that our demographics were changing, the people we were talking to were changing, the way they wanted to be spoken to, and was changing. The ways in which they were spoken to were changing, and this has just really shown it up, really, and it's just sort of put it very bleakly in our face. And actually, in some of those smaller universities, there's some of those smaller educational institutions, they're actually a little bit more agile and they can pivot, and they're picking up all of this innovative practice and
Indeed.
getting really into their marketing and communications and storytelling and things like that. Obviously, the big universities have got lots of money to put behind it, so they can already do those sorts of things. But there's a lot of people just sort of there going, "Oh, hang on a minute, we're not talking to 18 to 24-year-olds all the time now. We thought we were, no, we're talking to mature students, first time students. Non-traditional is a term you hear quite a lot throughout the sort of, especially the US and the UK markets, in that, we're not talking to who we thought we were talking to anymore. And the people we are talking to are actually getting a little bit annoyed by our narrative. we need to change. Or more difficult, a more difficult proposition for director of comms, say, or director of marketing at university, is that you used to just talk to 18 to 24-year-olds. Now
Mm.
you talk to 18 to 24-year-olds, people from different cultural backgrounds, international people of sort of mature age,
Of
students. You've
course.
got young families who are coming in. You've got people whose family have never come to university. Now you're having to tell like 10, 15 stories. And
Yeah.
it's a tough place. So when you find someone who can really tap into a particular group, I think that's a really valuable thing.
Yeah, I mean, I'm doing something with Nottingham Trent University on the influencer marketing side, and we've
Mm,
involved sort of 20 odd brands and 400 odd marketing students. And I love I mean, I've been it's one of the best times of my year is going up to speak to the students.
yeah,
I really get so much out of it, and I think that there's a lot of organizations out there that don't know, would love to employ students, don't understand perhaps how that can work. And when they start to see, I remember my sons, the finishing day, when the exhibition,
yeah.
like, wow, these guys have done some really cool stuff.
Yeah,
It
yeah. Well,
blew
I
my
mean,
mind.
you and I met at the event that we were at, and it was all around how do you talk to Gen Z? What do Gen Z
Of
think? How do
course.
they like to operate? Well, they're the best people to tell you that, So by engaging those students, and I think there's that term, the micro influencer, and things like that.
Yeah.
That user generated content is so valuable, to sort of play back into your own sense of feedback. You're saying, well, great, these guys are saying how brilliant it is to study at Nottingham Trent. Well, that's going to do 10 times the amount of work for us than it would if we just said we are great.
It really, really would, and I think that's why lots of brands are now realizing that they can create student ambassadors
Mm,
that are really, because effectively it's the first part of their buying journey in a way, isn't it? Once they're at
yeah,
university, they're getting their first knowledge and experience of brands, which means that they're going to stay with them for a lot longer potentially. And I know
yeah.
that's how the banks always used to treat it, is if we give students a really good deal when they open their bank account, they're not likely to leave us for a while.
Yeah, I mean, I've still
Cool.
got that's still my bank account now, the one that I opened in 18 years old. You're absolutely spot on. And
Yeah.
and the thing is as well is that universities are not only, or brands are not only understanding that. It's a really valuable time to be involved because brands are really quick and agile, and they can move really well, and they're really well informed, got the resource. And universities are at a point now, especially in places like the UK and the US, where they're going, well, we need to really work with industry closely now. That's a thing because for a number of reasons. A, they often know more than us because it's their day job. and it's not necessarily our day job. They've got more resource, they've got more ideas and more reference points, etc. But then also, you know, they it's about lifelong behaviours,
Cool.
and they know all about lifelong behaviours. The educational institution is all about embedding lifelong behaviours in the students, positive lifelong behaviours. I think when I was at uni, Red Bull used to sponsor everything. Now sometimes unis are thinking about, well, do we want kids on Red Bull their whole life? I don't know. I wouldn't comment. But it's all about, how do we get these lifelong behaviours for work, for learning, but also like sort of positive and sustainable choices in brands and companies and things like that. So it's all forming this ecosystem of a far more engaged and a far more sort of a deeper understanding of, well, I mean, whatever you want to call people, a user, a client, a customer, the learner, depending on which
Well, I think one of the
perspective you're coming from.
no, it's really interesting you say that, because I think we in the influencer industry, we use the word collaboration. And I think, where universities work really well is where they collaborate with the student almost. It's if you think about school, or had to go to school,
Yeah,
whereas actually the students have made a choice to go to that university, and they are paying for that.
yeah, yeah.
So they are in a way a customer as well. So I think that dynamic of where you get real collaboration together, where the students can experiment, can really reinforce I love what you said about, lifelong experiences. It's not just about, oh, I'm studying history. No, you're studying way more than history.
Yeah,
You
yeah,
really, really are. There's so many life lessons that you're going to get from that experience,
that's
and
it.
and where you can bring brands in to the university as well, like we're doing on this program. I love the practical element of it, the fact that we're seeing really interesting ideas in campaigns that actually an agency would charge quite handsomely for, to
Oh
be
yeah.
fair, you know.
Yeah, oh yes. Well,
So
and that's the thing, though, isn't it? You're right. This is it's sometimes a bit of a touchy subject, because you're talking about someone's education, which a lot of people, me included, would believe is a fundamental right. You have the right to have access to education, no matter
mm,
who you are, where you come from. But people are already, and like you said very very much at the start, people are already prepared to pay for it, because
quite.
they know it's about the mobility, and the great opportunities and access. And like you said, you're learning way more than just the discipline that you choose. But why does that mean that we then would just silo it off and say, right, well, okay, well, this is the experience you're going to have about learning, and this is the campus experience you're going to have, and the hybrid experience you're going to have? It's much more than that. These people have already said they're happy to pay the money. It's just more about how you give them the experience that they want. And these days, people want experience of, they want the campus experience. They want it back because they lost it for 2.5, 3 years.
Yeah.
And the friendships and the sort of the social element. They want the experience of high quality learning, and that is a topic for discussion, or for a different day, perhaps, what that looks like. But most importantly, they also want far greater exposure to vocational outcomes and employment opportunities.
Mm.
So why wouldn't you bring in private sector and companies and brands and all things like that? So it is one of those things where education has perhaps been a little bit hesitant in the past to sort of, what's the word, collaborate with industry, but now it's very much at the front of mind. And again, it's just about ensuring that you get mutually beneficial outcomes from everybody, and that in itself tells a really good story for universities. If a university can say, for example, I know the University of Queensland has this big collaboration with Boeing, and they get a lot of engineering students going in there because Boeing are involved. So you
There
not
you
only get
go.
the prestige of going to Queensland, which is a great university in Australia, but also you've got access to the probably preeminent aviation engineering company in the world.
Love
Which, if you
that.
were wanting to go into that industry, why would you not go there?
Yeah.
And so that when to bring it back to marketing and comms, it's it's just really is that sort of that touch point with what people want, I guess.
Yeah, no, I like what you said, because then there's not this uh difference between the university experience and the companies. It's all immersed. I was trying to say, it's all in one place. One thing I was going to ask you, Chris, as well: do many universities use students in an influencer marketing way, to your knowledge?
To my knowledge, I don't know any case studies or any ideas off the top of my head. That's not to say it's not being done. Yeah, I don't know. I mean, it's certainly something I've been reading up about, but whether people are at the stage where they want to sort of talk about it and hold people up as case studies, I'm not sure. I think again, like I said, education can sometimes be a little bit late to the game. And I think they're just in the stage of just sort of working things out and seeing how it goes
Yeah.
before they make a call on whether it's been a success or not. Because as we know, more so than any other sector, education is hugely focused on monitoring, evaluating
Yeah,
impact, and all of those
of
things.
course.
Also, to a degree, you've got to give over a lot of control to do that to your customer, like you said, or to your learner, to people whom you have a duty of care over as well. So it seems very straightforward because you're dealing with adults here and whatnot, but with that element of a duty of care, it can sometimes be about, well, is this something we want to spotlight, or is it just something we want to do, or both? So
Yeah.
it's sort of an underground world at the moment.
Oh, that's great. That's great. Well, look, it's really lovely to talk to you today, Chris. And how can people find out more about you?
Well, I think the best way is to go through well, I'm obviously on LinkedIn, just as Chris Platt, and obviously really happy to connect with people on there. I myself am trying to raise a profile to sort of influence and what have you, because obviously I've got my views in many different regions and speaking to all of these different types of institutions. But also, it's these events that we run are just great places and for people to meet and connect. That's half of the reason why we run them all. So if you ever just go on Google THE Live US, UK, Southeast Asia, wherever your region is, you'll find us, and those are the places that we really want to meet as many different people as we possibly can to get that real full story of the sector.
Great. Thank you. Thank you so much, Chris Platt. Who's That's it for another edition of Influence. Don't forget to subscribe to the show and give me your feedback, Gordon at gordonglenister.com, or you can follow me on LinkedIn, Facebook, Instagram, or Twitter, where you can also ask me a question. If you're able to give us a 5-star review, we really do appreciate it. And also, if you want help in creating an influencer marketing strategy, or you want to join the influencer marketing roundtable event, which we host every Wednesday morning on Zoom, then head over to gordonglenister.com, where you can find out more about the details. And if you want to find out more about our shows and many others, go over to the MPN, the Marketing Podcast Network, and you can find them all there. Thanks as always to my producer Neil Whiteside from Freedom One. And until next time, from me, Gordon Glenister, it's bye for now.